Hello everyone, as always I hope you're keeping safe and I hope you're keeping sane. Another video today that is based on one of your guys' questions, one of your guys' comments on a recent video. Now to paraphrase, the question was, if I was to win the lottery, and we'll assume by winning the lottery we mean millions and not one of those super diluted midweek rubbish ones where you end up with 6 figures rather than 7. If I won the lottery, would I go back to gambling, or if I was still gambling, would I continue gambling as a means of entertainment, as a bit of a hobby, as a bit of a way of alleviating some boredom? And let's face it, boredom comes thick and fast at the moment, doesn't it? Although in tribute to yesterday's announcements, I'm growing my hair to look like Boris, so yeah, we'll see how that pans out, eh? But we're not going to here to talk about that today. We're going to move on from that, and we're going to talk about this very question about winning the lottery. Now, I understand the logic. It makes total sense, doesn't it? The reason we as gamblers often find ourselves struggling in life is because we leave ourselves without enough money to pay bills, we leave ourselves without enough money to eat, and we basically leave ourselves skint at the most inopportune times. And generally, as to paraphrase, or again to misquote someone far more intelligent than myself, there's always too much month left at the end of the money. And we found ourselves in that position many, many times. So if we won the lottery, then we wouldn't have that problem, would we? If we lost a bit of money, it wouldn't matter. People often say if you bank all the money in the, you win on a national lottery jackpot, then you can live off the interest. So could you live and gamble off the interest and still be in a happy and comfortable financial position? Like I say, it's a very good point. However, my answer is categorically and incredibly simple. It is no. If I won the national lottery, not only would I not go back to gambling recreationally, would I not plan to gamble as a means of entertainment and as a hobby, I would take extra steps if that was possible. I would take as many steps as was possible. I would do everything I could to distance myself from gambling as much as was humanly possible. Now, to be completely honest with you, that's probably not massively possible. Now, I am restricted in pretty much every which way you can imagine when it comes to blocking gambling from my life. But winning the national lottery to me would instill a deep-seated fear that I would go back to gambling. Gambling, as I've discussed many, many times on this channel, is not a financial concern. It's not something that we do with a view to winning or making money. Gambling addiction is not based on the back of wins. Gambling addiction is based off the back of gambling. Win or loss. In fact, as I said many times, sometimes a win can become anticlimactic if it comes too soon, because we haven't had the fix of gambling, the fix of dopamine and the fix of adrenaline we get from the process of gambling and from awaiting outcomes. One other thing that we know about gambling is, whilst the promise of a win is not necessarily what motivates us to partake, it has to be there in order to allow us to go ahead and gamble. If we have millions in the bank, the idea of winning £100 on a fruit machine, whilst we might to some extent enjoy the process of seeing the lights flash and pushing the buttons and watching the reels spin, we're not going to get that dopamine, we're not going to get that adrenaline hit from the promise of a incredibly, relatively small payout based on our net worth. So what are we going to do? Well, of course, we're going to gamble higher stakes. Now, there are actually signs that that's going to become less and less possible, certainly online, where it's been traditionally possible to bet £100 spins or so on slots, and even, pretty much the sky's the limit on roulette and blackjack and other table games. There is signs in the UK that is coming to an end and that maximum stakes are coming into play. But for the time being, if you were to have a net worth of millions of pounds, you would, of course, naturally, in order to satisfy this addiction, you would increase your stake, because the returns would have to be at such a level. Even though we're not playing for returns, the returns would still have to be at such a level to pique your interest and to provide that level of suspense, that level of anticipation we get, which is ultimately what we're addicted to. Gambling is not a financial problem. Gambling is an addiction, it's a psychological problem. The fact we always leave ourselves skint as gamblers is a symptom, it's a side effect, it's a result of the addiction. And we can tell this because we often gamble well beyond our means, and we gamble until we're skint because we're hooked on the addiction. The amount of times that I walked into a bookies or something and played a FOBT, or went online and played the online slots, and within a very short period of time I was able to walk away with a profit. And I didn't. And the reason I didn't is because I hadn't had my fix. I hadn't had my fill of gambling. And what would happen quite often is whatever money I had, I would lose. And the reason I would lose is not because, I was unlucky. It's because I was hooked on the process of gambling. How many times have we been eating something that we particularly enjoy, normally something fatty, normally something salty, or possibly something sweet? You get the law of diminishing returns, don't you? You eat the first bit and you're less hungry. You eat another bit, you're a little bit less hungry, and eventually you're full up. But you keep eating, and you eat to the point that you make yourself sick. And the reason you do that is because you're not because you need to eat, not because you're necessarily, looking to achieve contentment, looking to achieve a status of not being hungry anymore, but you are addicted to the process of eating. And it's the same with gambling, it's the same with alcohol, it's the same with anything that can be addictive. So what would happen if I won the lottery and I went to gamble? Well, I would up my stakes, wouldn't I? I would increase my stakes time and time again in order to get the same buzz. And it doesn't matter how much money you have, how much money you won on the lottery, you would end up back in the same position. And that's far more damaging because psychologically you had or would have had an opportunity to change your life. You would have had an opportunity to set yourself up in a position where you could look after yourself, you could look after your family, you wouldn't have to work, and you could live a life that so many people would covet, so many people would be jealous of, and you will have thrown it away through gambling. And if you maintain a gambling addiction, I almost assure you that's exactly what would happen. We only need to look at Premier League footballers, and there's been some very, very high profile cases of gambling addiction, amongst sports people, and they are people who have lost everything. They have lost their potential fortune. They have worked in a job that many, many people would covet and earned a salary that a lot of people would be incredibly jealous of, and they are left with nothing because of an addiction. So if I won the lottery, would I go back to gambling? It's a very categorical hell no from me. Now, I can understand the appeal, and I will say, on a slightly different note, that I have in my brain caveats to my gambling recovery. I have caveats, like if I ever went to Vegas, I would allow X amount in order to play some games. Now, I have that caveat in my brain because it doesn't, it's not a blanket ban on everything. I say this when you start gambling and recovery. Don't tell yourself over and over again that you can never gamble again, because it becomes insurmountable. You can't imagine in the early stages of your life without gambling. And so in the early stages of my recovery, I told myself, if I went to the races on a stag do or something like that, I'd gamble. If I ever went to Monte Carlo, to Las Vegas, I would allow myself to gamble. Now, I know in my heart of hearts I won't do that. I know in my heart of hearts that I can't do that. Okay, but if you think about the idea of, if I ever won the lottery, I'd have a go again, fine. If that helps you in your recovery, the chances you win the lottery are so slim anyway. It doesn't really matter. But if you are in a position, less likely with the lottery, more likely with, sadly, something like inheritance or redundancy or something like that, where you are subject to a large payout, a large sum of money comes sort of out of the blue, then that is the time to put in extra blocks. That is the time to make sure the blocks that you have are watertight and you make sure that money is safe. I am in a position now, after nearly 2 years of recovery, where I have money in the bank, and that scares me. I actually get scared, I get concerned about the fact I have money available, because historically that money wouldn't be available for long. So if I log into my online banking and there's some money sat there, it scares me, because I know that is still part of my brain will still see that as gambling tokens. And if you sat there with millions in the bank, and that's a billion miles away from where I am, if you sat there with millions in the bank, then the temptation would be incredibly, incredibly strong. So, yes, if you do find yourself in a position where you have a windfall, and my dad always told me, chunks of money, large sums of money don't come along very often, so when they do, for God's sake, do something useful with them. If that happens to you, and even if you're in recovery, do something sensible. Make sure that money is safe, because there will be a part of your brain lying dormant that will see that as gambling tokens, and that's why you can never sort of scratch the surface with a little bit of casual or fun gambling. I hope that answered the question anyway. Like I say, a bit all over the place, that video, because I didn't script it, but thanks for watching. I'll catch you on the next one. Take it easy, stay safe, stay sane. The end is in sight. Yes, the light at the end of the tunnel is a little way down the tunnel. It feels like the Dartford Crossing at the moment rather than the Blackwell Tunnel, but we're getting there, aren't we? So hang in there. Like I say, stay safe, stay sane. Bookie's obviously opening again when the shops open in 7 weeks' time, so get those blocks in place. Make sure you can't go back to old ways when they reopen. Take it easy, guys. Speak to you soon.